Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this introduction and the meeting. And I would like to thank all of you for coming today, despite the busy agenda. My special thank is to Nora that she brought me once again here to Oslo after almost 1.5 years, and I stood also 1.5 years here to speak about the Arab Spring and our expectations of it, and I think it's not that, optimistic to talk about it again. But anyhow, today it will be another thing. What I want to share with you is some reflections, some primary and initial results which we have reached up till now in this big project. I will get you through the materials a bit. It will be a combination of some documents, some audio materials from the interwar period, and we will see how far we can go in order to give you an impression about the content of the research, and later we can discuss more things. But let me, first of all, to say one thing. This picture, remember it very well, because it's very, very, I think the other one is on the folder. But this, remember this, because it will come in my presentation as a very important source materials, because it's a very, very unique picture, but I will explain it later. I will not say all the secrets in the beginning. But let me just start. How did I find this project, or at least started to formulate some ideas regarding that? It started actually in 2005 when I was writing my PhD thesis in Leiden on the Muslim reformist Muhammad Rashid Rida, and I was working in his family archives, which was in the possession of his grandson in Cairo. Now it is in the King Abdulaziz Foundation in Riyadh, the whole collection of Rashid Rida, because of his affiliation and relationship with King Abdulaziz also. But whatever the case it is, when I was working on that in 2005, I came across 13 letters sent to Shaykh Rashid Rida by a certain Dr. Zaki Karam, living Karlstrasse number 10 in Berlin. Now, reading the letters, they express lots of things which just, tell us that this Zaki Karam in Berlin of the 20s and 30s was a Muslim figure with a prominent position, relatively a prominent position in the German capital at this time, telling Rashid Rida about himself, economics, Muslims in Berlin at this time, the Ahmadiyya mosque, etc., etc. And one of these letters was addressed to Rashid Rida under the title Muharram wa Shakhsi, forbidden and classified, in which he is telling Rashid Rida many secrets about his relationship with some Arab leaders, including Prince Faisal of Saudi Arabia, who has become later the king of Saudi Arabia after his father Abdulaziz Al Saud, who was at this time the Minister of Foreign Affairs. But anyhow, while doing this research, I thought, what to do? You start in secondary sources, and the story has become more complex because a colleague has defined him as a Muslim dentist living in Berlin at this time. Another historian, German historian, said no, it was a German Hauptmann, commander in the First World War. Now, all of a sudden, I looked at the name one day when I was working in Leiden in my office. Karam is a very unique name in Arabic. We are familiar, with the famous names in Arabic, Muhammad Ali and all these things, but Karam is very exceptional. So I got an idea at this time to check the telephone directory on the internet. And then all of a sudden, you find two people living in whole Germany under this family name, including Harun al-Rashid Zaki Karam, living in Kornwestheim, small village in the neighborhood of Stuttgart, who died 3 weeks ago. Unfortunately, and then calling him on that number from Leiden, asking him if this is the family Zaki Karam who lived in Karlstrasse number 10 in the 20s and 30s. The simple answer was a very, worried old gentleman telling me, how do you know I was born in this house in 1923? I'm his son. Then I calmed him down and I said, okay, I'm this. Do you know Rashid Rida? Yes, my father used to tell me about him. Do you know Prince Shakib Arslan? A prominent figure will come later. Yes, I know him, and I met him several times also during my father's life when I was a teenager. Then you go there in Kornwestheim, this small village, I had just built up a relationship, a friendship with the taxi driver, because this is the only one you can just in a small village doing research on Islam is a bit weird. But you go there in this German, really German village, and then you find in the cellar of this gentleman this. And there starts the story of the interwar period in my career. I went there, and to my big surprise, you find Zaki Karam, a Muslim commander of the Bedouin troops during the First World War fighting on the German side. You find diaries from the wartime, arms deals, Spanish documents. He traveled to Spain during the Second World War. A military coming to Germany after he has been injured. You see there, this is the last picture before his leg was amputated, because it was injured during the First World War, and there he stayed in hospital for 5 years where his leg was amputated. He fell in love with the German book manager in the bookshop in front of the hospital. Very standard romantic story in that period. And then this is the mother, Gertrude Neuendorf of Harun Rashid. Her picture will come later. But now, when you have these materials, diaries, letters, correspondences, you think, what is going on here? Now again, further and further, I was reading in this Arabic magazine. This is another aspect of the research, how the research started. Now, after some years, I was reading this article in Al-Fath magazine. Al-Fath is a reformist Salafi newspaper which was established in more or less in the 20s and 30s, and it is the sister of Al-Manar by Rashid Rida. So Al-Fath is a Salafiyya, but more populist Salafiyya magazine, but it was published in the same time as Rashid Rida. And I read this as a Dutchman living, just reading Secretary al-Jam'iyya al-Islamiyya al-Hollandiyya, the secretary of the Dutch Muslim Association, with a gentleman in his military uniform. I had no clue who he was at this time. And then the report is telling us that this gentleman went to Cairo in order to officially convert to Islam in Al-Azhar. He delivered speeches. He was, an interesting figure, accompanied by some Indonesian students studying in the Netherlands. Maybe I am too lucky in research, because the name van Beten is also exceptional in Dutch. And I will not divulge the secret. How did I find it? I leave it for you to guess. But anyhow, it happened. It was a bit difficult because I found about 10 names with this family van Beten in the Netherlands. And the grandson of the gentleman came to my office in Leiden, and they have shown me this. This is the Indonesian community in the Netherlands in the 20s and 30s. What you see here, van Beten there in the middle. Here, this is very interesting, remember this, because this is a Muslim marriage ceremony in the city hall of The Hague. And you see van Beten here is just blessing the new couples with the Quran. What is here is much more interesting, is a Muslim funeral ceremony through the streets of The Hague. You can imagine, in the 30s, that a Muslim funeral ceremony would be just, you can imagine in the 20s in Oslo, that Muslims would just carry the body to the cemetery, having this funeral ceremony. It was in The Hague of the 30s, and this is something new. There, above, during his visit in Cairo, with the Indonesian students in Cairo, studying at Al-Azhar, there. He's sitting in the middle there. But anyhow, you find these materials in Germany, in the Netherlands, and also in many other places of Europe where Muslims had lived. Then you started to wonder what to do with these materials. Then to see, can we put these materials in a broader framework of transcultural history, which means for us, the First World War was a big rupture in world history, not only in Europe, but also the Middle East. And I think that after the First World War, there is a kind of increasing awareness of Muslim and non-Muslim global connectivity. that on the one hand, especially after the Paris conference, all those victims of the war came to Europe in order to present their cases. All those Muslim militaries fighting on different fronts, like Karam, like the North African and Moroccan soldiers fighting on the French side, they settled in Europe. So we have here the question of border crossing and entanglement have changed a bit. And now if we take these materials we have now at hand, besides all other developments in this historical perspective, I think it is very important to emphasize in this project, and this is what we are doing the next 4 years, to put Western and non-Western memories together in order to see how far we can create new cultural and religious contact zones in that respect. But why Islam and Muslims in interwar? Let me emphasize one thing. We are not the first group who would claim that we are the first group to study Islam in interwar Europe. No. There is no claim at all. But when studying and approaching these individuals, like Karam from Beitul, who created networks, we will see what are these networks just in a minute. And then the question of agency, religious, cultural, political, military, all these things. There is a research gap in it because some of these movements have been already studied, but as part of colonial history. So you see them very visible in the resources, but as part of Middle Eastern history. They are, on the one hand, they are here in Europe physically, and their activities are based here, while we have the tendency to perceive them as part of the colonial history. Now, what would happen if we have it as entangled part of European history, which has relatively not done before? I think this would provide a new theoretical approach to deal with them within this global history network. We see here, just in order to give some impression, what do I mean exactly with that? What you see here, this is Prince Shakib Arslan. Prince Shakib Arslan, known to many of us, was a Druze Lebanese prince. He was in exile in Germany and later in Switzerland. As a Druze prince, he was in the network of Rashid Rida, a student of Muhammad Abdu, the well-known Egyptian reformist. Because of his anti-British, anti-French sentiments, he was sent to Europe in his exile, and he stayed from 1921 till 1925 in Berlin, and from 1925 till 46 he stayed, after the Second World War, he stayed in Switzerland, between Geneva and Zurich. One thing just to mention about Shakib Arslan, because I can talk about him for long, his activities and his things, but there are important things to emphasize before we move. Shakib Arslan, historians said he has changed Geneva to be the center of the Muslim world. There, from Geneva, from the mountains, the Swiss mountains, he was just like running the threats of Muslim activism. You can imagine a prince, okay, well off. There are some controversies that he was paid by fascist Italy, and there are many stories about him to tell. But his influence was major, especially on North Africa, because Moroccan and Tunisian and Algerian nationalists were students in Paris at this time, and they were trained politically by him, because he saw in them the necklace for Arab independence later. So those students played a major role in the independence of North Africa later. One of them, which is very surprisingly for many of us nowadays, was Bourguiba. So Bourguiba was in Europe, trained by him as a pan-Islamist, which he took the Tunisian project to a secularist approach later. If you mention just the names of Balafrage in Morocco, Abdul Khaliq al-Turais, Allal al-Fasi, Muhammad al-Fasi, all those Moroccan nationalists were students of Arslan. He visited Morocco, northern Spanish Morocco, in 1931, and this was a major visit in Moroccan history because it has changed many things in Moroccan history, especially the Berber questions and the Zahir Berber questions, which was issued by the French at this time. So Shakib Arslan connected the Mashriq with the Maghrib with this visit. He was very productive. He says about himself, and others say about him, he used to write 1,500 letters a year. So you can imagine, I would challenge you if you write 20 emails a day. Besides this, every day an article in Arabic, in a newspaper from Indonesia to North Africa. He has his own journal, La Nation Arabe, in Geneva, a Franco-Arabic, French-Arabic journal. But in order to get this impression from Geneva, I would like to share with you this document, because this document is from the French intelligence service. You see here, very complex network with all different categories of people, from socialists to pan-Islamists to communists. But what is intriguing about this is from the early 30s. Here, it's not read, but I will try to show it. Here, what you read is Shakib Arslan. So the French intelligence service was putting him in the middle of the network expanding to Amsterdam. And remember this, why Amsterdam? Remember from Baden, because it will come just in a minute, because he was in that network. And you see here, Arslan going to Spain, North Africa, Egypt, Palestine, Tunisia, expanding to Berlin, and then Vienna. So there was something happening there which was under the surveillance of the French intelligence service. Now, putting this political, at the end, it's a political secret service document, but putting Arslan nowadays, and if we see how expanded his network is, this is what we see here, more or less, but the others are things which we discover nowadays with the new materials and new things. He traveled to New York, he traveled to Russia, to Bosnia, to Budapest. There he visited Muslims in order to strengthen this Eastern European, Western European dimension. So he was just, his mobility was all over the globe. So as a global thinker, he made this influence on modern Islamic thinking when it comes to politics and anti-colonial movement. Again, I will stress, now I think the project will offer this new approach. We should not study them outside there, but inside here. Because their activities were here, they were based here, it was hard to turn it east, but at the end, they were here making part of European history. And I will strengthen this argument just later on the basis of some examples. Now, if we put this all in the new approaches of our understanding of transcultural history, histoire croisée, this idea of entanglement, that histories are not local anymore at this, because the human perception of history has increased to be global, cross-bordering. Histories were parallel, overlapping. So we will have now individual and collective action in one time when you study all these religious, political, and intellectual activities of Muslims living in interwar Europe. Now, this is our hypothesis, which is the title of the project. They are neither simply visitors nor colonial victims. Now, what were they? They were engaging actors. This global character should be emphasized in their activities. What you see here, very interesting anecdote, Zaki Karam in Berlin with a visitor, with this Arab clothes. What is interesting about this picture, because it's very special for me, I didn't know this gentleman at all, with Karam. And when I published my book some years ago about Zaki Karam in the Egyptian National Archives in 2010, after a couple of months I received an email from a Lebanese lady living in Kuwait, sending me an email telling me, "You have solved a family secret for us." I said, "Why?" And she sent me exactly the same picture. She said, "This picture I have seen in your book, and this is what we have in our family archives." And I have asked my father. My father didn't have a clue with whom my grandfather was in Berlin. Now, you know that it's here, and now we understand why my grandfather was in Berlin, because he was studying medicine with this Zaki Karam in the 20s and till the beginning of the 30s. So here you have now what I meant with this collective action, that the world, the global world, was just working and going and coming beyond our perception. Now, these new cultural, religious transfers are very, very important, and I will emphasize this how. Because we are dealing now with transcultural biographies, people coming and going, and I think this could offer us new insight, not only in the history of Islam in Europe, but also in new insight in our understanding of modern history and how far this transcultural biographies had shaped our history. I will try for the coming time just to discuss with you some of these overlapping networks, because they are not parallel, they are just like together, entangled, even not only entangled with European history, but together. Shakib Arslan, a pan-Islamist, involved in socio-political activities, and in the same time he is engaging in modernization of Islam. Cultural perception of Europe, Europe from within. How did they perceive Europe? Europe as the ugly colonizer, Europe as civilization, Europe as people, etc., etc. Religious, the religious motivations, activities, mosques, institutions, identities, you name it. So these are the things which are overlapping together. You remember this picture in the beginning, but another shot. I will tell you something, how did I find this picture, which is very, very unique. This is the first European Muslim Congress, which was held in Geneva in 1935. This is the first Muslim political activity, collective activity on European soils. But whom we are seeing here? Shakib Arslan in the middle, because he was the organizer and the mastermind behind this Congress. And then Muhammad Ali van Beten, the Dutch gentleman. You see how the networks are amazing. Van Beten in Cairo, meeting reformists, knowing Arslan, a friend of Rashid Rida, Zaki, Karam. And now, if we look at one of our PhD students is crazy about this picture, and every time he comes just telling me, you know, that he identified new peoples here. But very quickly, this is the Mufti of Poland. Here, what you see here. You would see some Egyptian students. This is, for example, an Egyptian medical student, Zaki Ali, who was in Vienna and later in Switzerland, and also one of the organizers. Here you find an Italian lady, Orientalist, who was participating in that. You find also some other interesting people, but anyhow, this is a combination of students, exiles, intellectuals, women, activists, converts, diplomats, ex-military, so it's a combination of all. But what is interesting about this was in the telephone directory story with this Van Beten, that the grandson would come to me, showing me this. When I saw this picture for the first time in the family album, I screamed, literally. I said to him, Geneva 1935. Then he said to me, how do you know? Because he doesn't know where it is. I said, look, this is Shakib Arslan in the middle, this is your grandfather, as a representative of Muslims in the Netherlands. And why he was representing Muslims in the Netherlands? Because at this time he was trying to build a mosque in The Hague. And he managed to establish the first Muslim cemetery in 1931, which is still in use by Muslims. Therefore, he went to this Congress in order to present the Dutch case of Islam, and we need your international support, that we, like Paris, like London, we would like also to have a mosque in The Hague. This proposal was made in 1929. I will tell you the first mosque, Ahmadiyya mosque, which saw light in the Netherlands was in 1955. So it took the Netherlands more than 30 years in order to have the first mosque in the same place. And when you see the first mosque, it was the same discussion which has been initiated, and the same place, the same site, which Van Betem has initiated by some of the Ahmadiyya members in The Hague at this time. Now, this all would just bring us again to the idea of politics, how to make politics. It's the avoided anti-colonial sentiments, but it was beside politics to also give Muslims a chance to establish themselves on European soils, because they were discussing this mosque issue, education of children, they were discussing many, many things, how Islam should be represented in Europe, and this is why, this explains for us why those Eastern European representatives were there. Because they had, in the mind of the organizers, this prior experience as European Muslims. So now they are rooted here, so we have to learn from their lessons how their experiences could be established in Western Europe. Back to Zaki Karam. And before I go on, I would like just to share with you, just in order just to relax a bit, this first.
فبذمام الليال لا ديون ثقال فبذمام الليال لا ديون ثقال فضل هذا المطال لنجاز الطالب فضل هذا المطال لنجاز الطالب.
You can imagine Zaki Karam sitting there in that house listening to this Arabic music with Gertrude standing there. Because what you have in Berlin, this was Dr. Rida, a Christian Lebanese. He's also the financial advisor of Shakib Arslan. He had a gramophone company in Berlin producing all these things. So this is one. And sorry that I interrupted the music, otherwise it will be just like we will start. The second one is this, and try to imagine the face of Zaki Karam with this one.
أساتذة المحترمين، إن للشرق والغرب ميزتان وكل منهما خاص بميزته. الغرب هو كالحيوان الميكا، فإنه أبدع لنا من الفنون والعلوم مما لا يتصوره الإنسان، وأنه أتى بعلومه إلى سرعة وكاد أن يطارد السحاب والنجوم.
What you hear here is actually a commercial in Arabic on the Nazi radio Berlin in Arabic about the company of Siemens. And Karam here with his voice, because he was also a broadcaster on that radio later for Nazi propaganda in the Arab world, would just say, okay, the East and the West, the East has the spirit, the West has the material, so we should combine the spirit with the material. So I ask all the people listening to me in Arabic, please buy Siemens. You know, so this is just a summary of what he was saying. Now back to him, you find in the archives interesting materials. What you see here, this is Karam. This is Prince Faisal of Saudi Arabia, later the King of Saudi Arabia, and this is KLM, coming from Amsterdam to Berlin. This is a Dutch company, and then he's here with his group. Karam is the dignitaries who should receive the prince, and there are many anecdotes to hear from his son about the reception at home and how his father prepared Arabic coffee for him at home, etc., etc. But back to him, what you see there, this is Gertrude Neudorf, this is her bookshop, which later Karam changed to be Abend und Morgenland Verlag, where he published many books in German about Arabic, and he is there in the window, and this is Gertrude there. The letters you see here, they are from the Yemeni government, and what you see here, the well-known red stamp of the Yemeni government during the time of Imam Yahya, الحكومة المتوكلية حرسها الله. You see here this stamp. All official letters from the palace had to be stamped by that. But what is interesting about this is also a letter by the handwriting of Imam Yahya, the king of Yemen. Karam played an important role in the arms deals in Yemen. So he was one of the important people who sent German weapons as an intermediary between the Mauser rival company and the Yemeni government. There are many things about that to discuss, but anyhow, you have to understand something. The Yemeni government, it has followed some policy of isolation in the time of Imam Yahya, except in the field of weaponry. A British traveler at that time, when Karam went in the 30s to Yemen, had made a fascinating anecdote. If you see a German in Sana'a, he is either making a music gramophone or dealing in weapons with Imam Yahya. So it was a blooming business. It was a business for German traders at this time. Karam made an attempt to do that. He went to Yemen in 31, 34, and 37. One thing, he was one of the important people for the Mauser. I will tell you something up till now. This is when I knew for the first, when I met a colleague in Leiden, Yemeni colleague, and I mentioned the name of Zaki Karam. He told me, is this Zaki Karam a human being? I said, yes, he's a human being. He said, no, this is the name of the Mauser rival in Yemen. So he said, if you go to any average market and you ask people, I would like to have one Zaki Karam, they know exactly, and he starts to explain to me the short one with this, with that, and he started to make a description of what that does mean. And you find some folklore songs that in Yemeni culture that your love has hit my heart, like Zaki Karam would hit the enemy. And another thing which is very, very interesting in novels. In some modern novels, you find a dialogue between a son and a father, and they would like to take revenge from another tribe, and he would say, I will go to the market and buy one Zaki Karam and kill them all. You see it just now in the Yemeni consciousness, in the Yemeni, it's for ethnography, it's very, very interesting that it's known, but where does it come from in history? I think it was very, very interesting to know that the people, I mean, just this is something, the relevant of our historical research to, put emphasis on that. So this is just in order to give them an impression about some of the political, military aspects of that, including also the cooperation with Nazi Germany with some of those people later. And this is a question we can discuss during the questions and answers, and I'm ready to answer it in order, just like now we have not much time. The question of cultural networks, cultural impressions. We are talking now about the popularization of European thought in the Arab Muslim world. Because those Muslims living here claim to have a first-hand experience and knowledge of Europe. So now, from their new position as Muslims in that period, would like to let you know there in the Arab world what Europe is. Europe is it a secular continent, or religion still plays a role in that? What does it mean to be a European? What does it mean to be a European Orientalist? All these things within different, trends were just like, propagated and also seen and perceived in these newspapers. The same Al-Fath magazine by Van Baker was very, very interested in Islam in Europe at this time, writing reports about it, asking those Muslims living in Europe to expand their knowledge in the Middle East and in Arab press. What you see here, two articles from this Al-Fath by a Moroccan Salafi scholar who studied in Bonn at this time. Later he became very close to the Wahhabi Salafi discourse. Shaykh Taqi Din Al-Hilali, I might write his name here, Taqi Ad-Din Al-Hilali. It's very important because he laid the ground for literalist Salafiyya in Morocco, known for his Quran translation into English. For those who are familiar with the Quran translation, Muhsin Khan al-Hilali, Hilali, just to cut it short, a globe-trotter. His career started as a Moroccan traditional scholar, as a Tijani Sufi. In Fas, in 1921, he converted to Salafism. Salafism, the model of Rashid, Rida and Abdu. And then he went to Egypt, he toured Egypt, and he became a student of Rashid Rida. Rashid Rida sent him to Saudi Arabia. There he became the teacher of Hadith in Mecca and Medina. And then he went to India. There he learned English in a missionary school, Christian missionary school. And then he went to Afghanistan, and then Afghanistan to Iraq, and from Iraq to Syria, and then Switzerland to Shakib Arslan. You see the network. And then Shakib Arslan, because they have been writing in the same magazine, so they knew each other. They have never met, but they knew each other. That an article by Shakib Arslan is besides Al-Hilal. And then he invited him to come in 1936 to Switzerland, and he introduced him to the Auswärtiges Amt, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Germany. And there he was sent to the well-known Orientalist Paul Kala, and there he taught Arabic literature in Bonn from 1936 till the beginning of the war. And then he moved to Berlin, but he wrote his PhD thesis at the University of Berlin about the Indian polymath Al-Biruni. Now, this Hilali was now writing from Bonn such articles. Here what you see, النفس الإفرنجية, which means the Ifranji nafs, the self. What does it mean? What does it mean? You have to, I'm now telling you. Here, another example, أهل أوروبا والتدين, the people of Europe and religiosity. Don't think that now the Europeans are on the secularization path, that they are now loose from religion. On the contrary, they are still religious. And he mentions examples and anecdotes. The church in Bonn, how does it with this church culture taxes every year, which every German citizen should pay to the church, and what is the complexity of that, and how religion is used in Europe also in order to mobilize the people. So writing about this from this first-hand experience has played a role in the popularization of Muslim thought in the Arab thinking. Religious networks in order to end, and the Ahmadiyya has played the most important role in that religious sense. Why? Because they built mosques. This is a mosque of Berlin in the 20s, and what you have here, the Muslimish Review, the Islamic Review, these are two important magazines in German and in English. What this published in Berlin, and the other is in London, and there they have just recruited converts, people writing about that. And don't forget that here this idea of conversion was very important for them, because they had adopted some Protestant methods in recruiting Muslims, having these magazines, talking to poor people, introducing Islam as a modern religion, because they knew perfectly well that after the First World War, European thinkers especially were struggling with the idea of the new man. Looking for this new man, it could be in Buddhism, in Hinduism, and Islam was for the Ahmadiyya an option. This is why we have to introduce Islam for Europeans. So with these new strategies and new methods, they approached many European corners, and they have recruited also many converts at this time and also after the Second World War. In order to end my talk, and I hope that in the discussion we can just discuss many things about this, and I would love to hear from you, I would just say, look at the differences. Now, Hassan al-Banna and Tariq Ramadan. I mean, just their features look like each other, but this is not our case here. But I would like to emphasize one thing. What I'm going to say is not a very hard claim that the Islamist project in Europe before the Second World War is the same like the Second World War. I'm not making this claim at all. And I'm not making the claim that there is a kind of continuation in all senses of the word. But we know that Hassan al-Banna never traveled to Europe. At least this is what we know. Maybe he came on a secret mission, we don't know. But we know that in his career, he never came to Europe. But the father of Tariq Ramadan, Saeed Ramadan, the right hand of Hassan al-Banna, after the war, when he fled the Egyptian regime, where did he come? In Switzerland. So it was no accident to choose for Switzerland because of its neutrality, at least during the Second World War. So now they built the first Ikhwan mosque in Europe, in Switzerland. And now, the Ramadan coming from this milieu, which was a before the war milieu, talking about European Islam, can we seek here parallels in this interwar period about the idea of European Islam? You can say yes, because these Eastern Europeans had played a role in shaping what we can call European Islam in their own understanding of the world. This is why I think if we collect these debates in interwar Europe, try to compare it with the current debates about Islam and the Muslim and the world of Europe and the world of Islam, we can just see there is what I would claim a kind of missing link in that all. This is correct to argue, in my view, it is a kind of early Muslim Islamist activism in Europe in that time, and I think it's not only a contribution in the history of Islam in Europe, but also European history, as we have said, and the question of European Islam is relevant there, and I think without seeking any highly tailored hypothesis in that, I think this present Islamist discourse in Europe, when it comes to the participation on the European scene, could be traced in these ideas, because those thinkers in the interwar period were writing about European constitutions, democracy, political participations in their own vision, at least. So I think parallels and differences and agreements could be traced in that, and this would create, in my view, a frontier knowledge in the pre-migration, pre-integration experience of Muslim. And here I end, and thank you so much for your attention.